Welcome to the Rock Back Pages podcast. I'm Barney Hoskins, and I'm in our Hammersmith recording suite with Mark Pringle.
Hi, Barney.
And Jasper Mirison Bowie.
Hello, Barney. There's nothing sweet about it.
For this episode, we're joined by a legend of British music journalism, the one and only Norman Jopling. Welcome, Norman.
Thank you.
We're going to be talking about Record Mirror and the Rolling Stones, and we're going to hear clips from a terrific audio interview with the late Charlie Watts. But let's start, Norman, with how you fell in love with pop in the first place. Was there a formative musical moment in your childhood?
Not particularly. I remember I must have been about, I suppose, 9 or 10, and I was given a wind-up gramophone with some old 78s, some of which I liked very much. Ethel Smith, Tico, various other sort of jazzy things.
Yeah.
So that kind of turned me on to the rhythm. And I didn't get any other records then until probably, I must have been, I think when I was 14, I sold my Triang train layout and I bought a little record player with, and started buying 45s, and I think the first 2 albums I bought were the Chirping Crickets and Elvis's Golden Records, Volume 1. And I bought some singles, bought a couple of oldie singles, Bebop, Alula and Diana, and a couple of current singles, which I think was an Everly Brothers thing, and I can't remember the other one. But that was really how it started. But of course I've been listening to Radio Luxembourg for a little while, and that turned me on to essentially American music, because before that, it was two-way family favourites. And if you heard anything decent on that, you'd listen to it just for that, just for the odd rock and roll that would come on. But of course, as soon as you get onto Luxembourg, then you hear those wonderful sponsored programmes that the record companies would do. And of course, you would hear all the stuff that they were issuing. You'd hear the obscure stuff as well as the hits. So it was a very good way of keeping up with new releases then.
Yeah, absolutely. And then this position opens up at Record Mirror for, Office Boy. Is that sort of understating it a bit? Was it an Office Boy?
No, it was Office Boy. If you looked in the Evening Standard in those days, you would find column after column of junior vacancies for Office Boys. But I left school at 16, and my first job was at the Cambridge University Press in Euston Road. And it was a terrible, boring job. And Kalamazoo ledgers, it was Dickensian. And I used to, at lunchtime, I used to walk up Tottenham Court Road or Gower Street to Soho, and I'd just sort of walk around and fell in love with Soho. And after about 6 months, I knew I couldn't stay at the Cambridge Press anymore. And I found this little place called Soho Youth Employment Agency, which was a branch of social services at that time. And I went up there and went through a load of jobs with them, and because I think I had three GCEs, and the 3 GCE jobs were terrible, and the 2 GCE jobs were terrible. There was only one guy in this little room, and the one you had to have the 1 GCE always had to be English language, and none of them were any good. And the guy said, I've got a couple of little jobs. I don't care whether you've got any GCs or not. And the first one was actually the best job so far. It was a factotum at a well-known MP's place in Savile Row. And I thought, well, that sounds good. And he said, great, we'll send you for that one. I said, well, what's the other one? And he said, it's Office Boy at Record and Show Mirror. And I felt like I won the pool at that point.
Fantastic.
And I said, that's the one I want. And, of course, a day or so later, I went to see Record Mirror. I thought it would be like, Centre Point, because I used to buy the pop papers at that time. And, of course, it wasn't. It was just an apartment over, I think it was Drum City at the time, or Drum City Mabin a bit later. But I thought, well, I got there. Isidore Green was the editor. And he said, I'm really sorry, I should have taken that advert out months ago. We've already got an Office Boy. And I'm going, oh dear. And I thought, and I was thinking, this is my destiny. And no, it wasn't at that point. And he must have seen the expression on my face. He said, look, he said, the he said, our office boy's leaving in, I don't know, a couple of months, something like that. He's getting a job with his father, photographer. I thought he was going to say, I'll give you a call back. But he didn't. He said, you come up here every week on a Thursday, and when he leaves, you can get the job and you can give your notice on the Friday. And that's what happened. So I went up every Thursday. I'd go up and, made friends with everybody and fell in love with the place. I felt like I'd sort of come home.
Yeah.
It was that feeling you get when you find somewhere that you really love to work in. And I knew I was going to love it there. So come my 17th birthday, Izzy said to me, well, he said, you can start after you've, served out your week's notice. And that's what I did. And I got a quid for my birthday and 5 bob extra. So I was earning 6 quid a week, which was, 1961, early 1961. It wasn't bad. None of my mates were earning that much.
Were you living at home still?
I was, yes. I was still living at home. So, I didn't have to worry about
all
those things. Rent, food, washing clothes.
So that wage was really quite useful.
Yeah. Oh, it was. It was very
all went
useful.
on record, probably. Although you were getting free records, I guess.
Well, not at that point, but I soon was, because they used to send, all the record companies would send the new releases through. They send a list of all the new releases. And if you wanted them, they'd automatically send all the new releases anyway, but they'd also send another list, and you could tick it. When they would automatically send them, it would always be the demo 45s. But if you ticked it, they would then send another lot of the regular ones. Mm-hmm. So I used to tick this thing and get all the regular ones. In addition to the, I was 17. I was mad about music. And I wanted all this stuff. So I think I've been working there for about, doing the office boy stuff, compiling the charts, making tea, deliveries on the van, the whole bit. And it must have been about, started in, I think it was February, something like that, February, March.
Of what?
And
What year?
61. 1961. And round about, must have been about May or June, Ian Dove, who was the... You know Ian Dove.
Of course.
He said...
We have him on Rock's Back Pages and Devices.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
He died, a couple of years ago?
Yeah, I was so upset about it, actually.
Because he was a real mentor to you.
Oh, he was. He was... he said, he said, can you write? And I said, well, I was good at essays at school. And he said, try rewriting this. And he gave me this press handout. I couldn't make head or tail of it anyway, so I can't do that. And I was sort of thinking about it, and then I wrote this little bit about. I used to go and get all the papers every day for everybody, and I'd go to Solosi's in Charing Cross Road. That was a terrific newsagent, best in London. Buy all the daily papers and all the music papers and all the American music papers. So I used to read all these things, and I did this little thing, and I said, I've got this little look at the US charts, and I used this, and I thought, oh, that's great. But actually, they sent me to a concert before to do a review. It was an Adam Faith concert. And it was a great concert because the fans were going crazy for Adam Faith. And I wrote this, and Ian looked at it, and he completely rewrote the thing, saying, oh, how terrible the fans were, and this was the worst thing since Bewley, 1950, whatever. And I read this afterwards, and I thought, no, but sure, that's the way to do it. You've got to have something to hang it on. You've got to have a hook. And then I wrote another thing about crazy names of American groups, because the American doo-wop revival.
We've got that piece on RBP. I'm delighted to say. Great.
And that was the first. I wrote it out by hand. I gave that to Ian, and the next week he typed it all out. Hardly changed a thing, and it was on page 3. And I thought, yes,
fantastic.
That's it.
With your byline,
with my byline,
fantastic.
With my byline, and I was over the moon, and there was no stopping me after that. No stopping me.
Switch question, because you talked about what you first started listening to. When did black music become absolutely central? Because one of the things, our great stack of record mirrors have got the name Wingfield written on the cover, because Pete Wingfield gave them to us, because he was buying them when he was at school, because it was the paper that covered black music more than the others. Yes. You in particular doing that.
Well, I first became aware of black music, I suppose, when I became aware of rock and roll.
Right.
And, then you find out about Little Richard and Frankie Lyman and then, of course, Ray Charles.
Yes.
So that started to feel very interesting. And when I got to Record Mirror, it was a time when what we call rock and roll in the UK had sort of more or less died out because of the various things that had happened to this one and that one. And it became obvious that rhythm and blues, if you like that excitement and that rhythm and that was what turned you on, then we were all finding out that it was rhythm and blues. And not only was it rhythm and blues, but you had like 10 years of this music that nobody knew very much about.
Well, I got a woman way over town that's good to me. Oh, yeah. Say, I got a woman way over town, good to me.
And Ian had a column in Record and Show Mirror. No, New Record Mirror. After Izzy left, they put in Jimmy Watson as editor, and Ian had a column in New Record Mirror. I think it was Rhythm and Blues Roundup, something like that. First of all under his name and then under a pen name. So I would read this. So it was Ian really that turned me on to rhythm and blues in a more serious way. And then when I started to write, I did. They didn't let me interview anybody for a year because I was 17. They said I was too young. They said I was too young.
Too young to talk to people.
Too young to talk to people. Yes. I wasn't sophisticated enough, I guess. But anyway, so I'd write all these profile pieces and gimmicky little pieces and anything that came into my head. Really, why haven't the Shirelles had a hit this week, kind of thing. And then I had an idea for a column called Fallen Idols, where I could write about all my rock and roll favourites. So I did that. And then all this time I'm getting more and more into black music and rhythm and blues, all through records, incidentally. And sort of by about 62, I'm finding out that there was a British rhythm and blues scene. But getting back to the black scene, then I started a column called Fallen Idols.
Great Unknowns.
Great Unknowns. And that was the one where I was able to profile all these great black, really current black pop artists that nobody was writing about.
You must have had some dealings with Guy Stevens at that time.
Oh,
he was writing. Curiously, he was doing what was very common then, and now would be regarded as fairly scandalous, is that he was basically writing about artists he actually represented in real life in the paper, because he was a record company man dealing with basically the Chess catalogue, wasn't he? Was it Pie?
Well, Guy came up, because people used to come up to see me at Record Mirror, because it wasn't a big scene then. The rhythm and blues scene wasn't a big scene, and Guy came up to see me, and very enthusiastic and huge knowledge of the whole thing. I mean, 10 times more than I knew about it. And we were friends, and we would hang out, and then he came up and he got the gig at the Scene Club to do the R&B night on Monday.
Right.
And that led him to, I think he did an album for EMI that was...
it was on the stateside label, wasn't it?
Yeah, it may well have been. And it was, I'm trying to think of the American record label, Lazy Lester, Slim
Excello.
Excello.
Yes.
Excello, it's Excello stuff. Terrific album. And that brought him to the attention of Pie. And of course, what Guy did, and of course, Pie had Chess. And,
that's right.
Various other things. Of course, what that did with Guy was he showed that you could get hits from reissuing back catalogue. Which was launched him, really.
In your wonderful book, Shake It Up, Baby, you write about these characters, and some of them we have on RBP, which we're so thrilled about. So obviously, we've got Peter Jones stuff, we've got Ian Dove stuff, Guy Stevens. You also, of course, talk about Bill Harry and Mersey Beat, and you wrote one of the very earliest pieces on the Beatles, just a short piece. You mention that in Shake It Up, Baby. Bill Harry then also corresponds for Record Mirror. So Record Mirror is really like quite early on the scene with all of these.
Yes.
All of these phenomena, right?
Yeah. Well, we didn't have the staff that NME or Melody Maker had, because we were the only independent. I think Ian left around the end of 62, and so there was just really Peter Jones, myself, and I don't think we had anybody else. We were just using a whole
no one
lot
else
of
writing regularly.
No,
just
a whole bunch of freelancers we'd use from different parts of the country.
Sure.
You know, Birmingham beat, because the whole beat thing was.
But I mean, the paper had a real identity. I mean, of course, I was too young to be reading it then, and you know, I'm the melody maker / enemy generation of readers in a way. But I find it fascinating now because it has a clearer, not strictly chart pop identity than any of the other Inkies, partly because of your writing significant amount about black music, which really wasn't sort of happening anywhere else, I don't think, at the time. No. I mean, the Melody Maker wrote about jazz, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
But they didn't write about R&B much at all. Enemy, neither. So it's very interesting. Reading the Record Mirror now, it's got such a strong and interesting identity. I was to mention Pete Wingfield buying it. For him, it was, you know, as a soul boy at public school in 1964 or whatever, this sort of stuff. It was gold dust, what you were doing there.
I mean, we're going to talk about the rhythm and blues scene. We're going to talk about the Rollin Stones. When you came into this world, and before you were aware of the Rollin Stones, what did you know about rhythm and blues in terms of going back to like Chris Barber and, of course, the Alexis Corners Ealing Blues Club, which opened in, I think, March 62, and then you see the Stones for the first time in early 63. So were you aware of the backdrop to what became this extraordinary...
Oh, yes.
You knew about Chris Barber.
Yes, I was. I used to go down to the Marquee and
Yeah.
check out Alexis, but the problem that I had was I was such a purist for American rhythm and blues that I appreciated what they were doing down there, but it didn't move me.
No, sure.
And you know, it seemed sort of worthy, and I felt a bit guilty. And Long John Baldry used to say, "Why aren't you writing about us?" You know, things like that. But I couldn't bring myself to write about it because I didn't. It just wasn't doing anything for me. I wished it had have done, but it didn't.
Yes.
So I couldn't really write about it. And really, that was my attitude until I saw the Rolling Stones.
Yes, and you were reluctant to actually go to Richmond to see them.
I was really reluctant.
Yes. So what happened?
Well, what happened was Giorgio Gomulski was... Peter Jones used to hold court at a pub, Deham's, just round the corner from Record Mirror. And it was... of course, because what he could provide was column inches. So, of course, all the publicists and the managers and the agents would be there and Peter would hold court. And Giorgio had been pestering him to go down to Richmond. Yeah. And Peter never went anywhere. I mean, it was Record Mirror, Deham's, and that was it. And back home. But for some reason, Giorgio was so persuasive that he managed to get Peter to go down to Richmond to see the Rolling Stones. He never knew what an accomplishment that was, actually. So Peter came back and he said to me, he said, I've got to get George off my back. He said, will you write about them? And I said, well, no, Pete, because they're British rhythm and blues and they'll be useless.
Principled stance.
And so this sort of to and fro for a while, and eventually Peter said, "Oh well," he says, "I suppose I'll have to write about them." Now Peter didn't like rhythm and blues. He was sort of showbiz pop kind of thing.
Old school.
And he said, "You're supposed to be the rhythm and blues man." And I thought, "All right." So I said, "All right, I'll go see him." So I booked Bill Williams, who was a photographer, and went down there with my girlfriend. And we got there, and we were a bit late, and there was a big crowd outside that couldn't get in. So we elbowed our way to the front, press cards, cameras. Giorgio sort of, and he saw it was us, dragged us in, pushed us into this room, and bam, they were playing. It was a Bo Diddley beat, so I would imagine the song was Mother. I was completely overwhelmed by this, and then it went on one thing after another. and I'd never heard anything this good. I mean, I'd seen, this was 2 years after I joined Record Mirror, and I'd seen a lot of artists, American artists, British artists, and I'd never seen or felt anything this good.
Wow.
Really. And I remember thinking to myself, we can do it. White people can do it. I remember that very thought. I mean, maybe white people never could do it any better than that, than they did it.
That was
then.
as good as it got. Yeah.
But nevertheless, that's what I thought. Anyway, it stopped. The band was packing up, and Giorgio was glad handing me and all the rest of it. Bill Williams split with the photographs, and they all came down from the stage, and I was introduced to them. And Brian did seem to be the leader at that point.
Yeah.
He really did seem to be the leader, and he was the most talkative one. And blah 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 blah. I know we were chatting away, and he said, "What can you do for us?" And well, really anything you want, actually. And then we went off to some producer's place. I think a film producer friend of Giorgio's, and we were just hanging around there for the rest of the, half of the night, and of course there were 6 of them there, as you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
And everybody, they're all picking up instruments, even Mick, and playing this, that, and the other. Just as a very casual thing. And I was chatting to Keith and to
fantastic.
Keith and to Charlie.
Yeah.
I remember talking to Keith. We were talking about the latest Mary Wells record that we, the kind of conversations that we would have there.
Of course.
And we were both very disappointed that Laughing Boy wasn't any good, and hoping that your old standby would be better, which of course it was. And then
And of course, Andrew Oldham wrote your piece and went down the following week having read your piece.
Well, what happened then was, I got back to Record Mirror, and it couldn't go in the next edition because the photographs wouldn't have been ready, and I would have had to have written it. And I had this feeling that it was an important thing to write.
Right.
And for one thing, it was the first article in Record Mirror that had been about an act that did not have a record.
Right.
So they didn't have a record. So, and I had to get permission from Jimmy Watson, the editor, to run this thing. But of course, Peter was on side. So,
if only to get Giorgio Gamelski off his back.
So I wrote the article. In the meantime, before it appeared, I think it must have been the issue after the next issue. Of course, Peter is down at Deham's again. Everybody's around him, and Andrew Oldham, who at that point was a PR, had his own PR company, and was I think his main client was Mark Winter, actually, at that point. And Peter, he was obviously pestering Peter for these column inches for Mark, and Peter said, "Look, why don't you go and check out the Rollin Stones?" He said they're down at Richmond. He said, and they're really good. And Norman's writing an article about them. It's going to appear next week, and nobody's heard of them now, but when the article appears, everybody will have heard of them. So Andrew, being a shrewdie, to put it mildly, went to Richmond, and the rest, as they say, is history.
Yeah. Sure.
And that was that.
Yeah. I mean, I live quite near Richmond, so I often walk past where the Station Hotel and the Crawdaddy Crawdaddy Club was. So I always think, my God, it all started here. Just such a sort of the beginning of kind of British rock as we know it.
Someone put a book out recently.
It's called Raving Upon Thames.
That's right. And it's all about just having that one small... But, you've got Eel Pie Island as well. We've got a sort of extraordinary concentration of places where those bands were playing.
Yeah. I mean, in addition to the pieces by you that we're featuring, including, of course, the famous Genuine R&B piece from the 11th of May, 63, I've also added this piece John Pidgeon wrote for Let It Rock in 1973. 10 years later, he's looking back on the R&B scene in London and the South East, and he mentions all the great venues, and it's fascinating kind of retrospective. I just wanted to quote from rereading this piece, you say that like 3 months ago, which would be kind of, I guess, January or February, only 50 people were turning up to see the Stones at the Station Hotel, and now it's like 400 trying to get in. And there's a quote I love at the end. And you say they say, so I don't know who's actually saying this. It's probably Brian. But you say, boys, do not use original material. After all, can you imagine a British composed R&B number? It just wouldn't make it. Of course, Oldham, when the first album comes out, there is this one Jagger Richards song, Tell Me, which is not rhythm and blues at all, but Oldham kind of could see where Lennon and McCartney were going, and so he's like, you've got to start writing. He literally hands Keith an acoustic. He's like, go sit in that room and don't come out till you've written a song.
For very good financial reasons, because publishing is such a big chunk of the income you get as a band or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, how much are Jagger and Richards worth today?
Well, Andrew Oldham would clearly have liked his 20% of that chunk of the pie, wouldn't he?
Yes. You also mentioned, of course, the Beatles had 2 or 3 weeks before you went. The Beatles had checked out the Stones at the Crawdaddy Club and were already championing them, and so. The next piece that we're on is like a year later, and it's about the Yardbirds who took over the Stones residency. So that's really interesting as well. And in your book, you talk about when I think Guy Stevens brings a 19-year-old Eric Clapton to the Record Mirror offices, and you take an instant dislike to him.
Well done.
Well, the thing was that Guy was bringing people up to Record Mirror and rhythm and blues fans, and he came up one Saturday with a few people, and Eric was with him, and Eric looked terrific. He I can't remember what he was wearing. I think it was probably one of those jackets from Austin's in Shaftesbury Avenue.
He was a proper mod, wasn't he?
He was a top face.
And he looked really good. And I was into clothes in a big way too. And Record Mirror, it's just a small apartment. And for some reason I kind of took exception to Eric being there. And I thought, and I didn't like this guy. Anyway, afterwards I felt quite ashamed of myself for this, and a few weeks after that I was down at the Scene Club, and I don't know who Eric was playing with. It might have been, was he with the Roosters or Casey Jones?
It might have been the Roosters.
One of those or both, I don't know. And he'd missed his last thing home, and I thought, well, I've kind of got to... I mean, I wasn't personally hostile to him in person, but that was just the way I felt. And afterwards, I thought, what the fuck was that all about? And so I said I'll give you a lift, Eric. I'll take you back to where you are, because I had a scooter on a Vespa GS then. And I drove him back to somewhere in South London, and I think I might have done that a couple of times actually. Yeah. So this sort of negated my hostility, as it were, and I felt that I sort of made up for it. But I don't ever remember meeting Eric after that.
Oh, really? Okay.
I don't. Okay. I might have done, but I don't think I even interviewed him for that article. I mean, I read the article the other day, and it reads like a subbed press handout to me. It's a pretty terrible article. The only thing that I added to it was the fact that the Telegraph had called them the Yardsticks.
Yes. At the end of the piece, you spell out.
I spelled it out.
Capital letters, Yardbird. Yes. Very funny.
I think that was the only thing that I really added to it. But the rest of it I must have got from Giorgio. Yeah. I think it's probably a favour to Giorgio anyway, because I don't ever remember seeing the Yardbirds until, shame on me, the time I remember really seeing them was in '66 when they were at the Albert Hall supporting they were on a bill with the Stones and Ike and Tina.
Right.
And it was a fantastic show.
Jimmy Page presumably in the band at that point.
No, I think it was
Jeff Beck.
Jeff Beck, yeah.
Didn't Jimmy play bass in the Yardbirds, and maybe it was 1967 he joined.
Yeah, I think so.
It was his latest, right? Yeah. But I mean, it must have been amazing.
Well,
Beck must have been supernatural.
I mean, the Yardbirds were terrific. I mean, they were really terrific.
Yeah.
And Argentina, out of this world. So I thought the Stones are never going to be able to follow this, but they did, because of course the Beatles had retired from a few months previously. And the Stones just rocked the whole thing. And
the Yardbirds' weakness was dear old Keith Relf was not a strong lead singer. I mean, if they had had a strong lead singer, could they have got close to, let's say, the Stones in terms of...
I don't think so. No. I mean, Keith had an edge to him, though. There was a nice vocal edge to him.
Sure.
So you wrote for Record Mirror right up until 1968, and you did then come back in various capacities, but you actually left the staff job in 1968. But in that time, I mean, you interviewed just everybody, and there are excerpts from those pieces in your book which are great, and some of them we have on RBP. And so you were very, very, close to what was happening and how music was changing. And I mean, so much change. If you think about where the Stones went from 1962, let's say, when they were first playing, to 1968, Beggar's Banquet. I mean, they changed so much in that time, don't they? And so does music journalism. So, I mean, how do you remember that very concentrated period where all the rules were being torn up, everyone was experimenting, writing their own material? How do you look back on the 60s at that point?
Well, yes, it was quick. It was all happening quick, because nobody knew it was going to last. So you had, I mean, 63 was really the year of Mersey Beat. 64 was when it went global. And really that's sort of when the really big changes happened, I guess, because a lot of American money was coming in at that point. And to a certain extent, that sort of divorced a lot of artists from the press and just all the hangers-on. That's what happens with money. And, of course, and then, I guess a year or so later, drugs came into it, which accelerated the whole change, the whole musical change. And so it's fascinating, actually, absolutely fascinating.
What do you make of the nascent underground scene? Did you go to UFO and places like that at all, see people play? Or?
Yeah, now and then. But I wasn't. I used to drink a lot, but I never took speed.
Right.
At that point, and
which made you almost unique in the sort of London rock and roll scene.
I think probably, yeah. But I never. I didn't smoke cigarettes. You see,
right.
So I wasn't into smoking dope.
Yeah.
In fact, the first thing I ever took was LSD.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's an entry into the thing.
Yeah. I jumped in the deep end there. And of course, you take that, and of course, your whole outlook completely changed. But of course, you do realise what else is going on, and what had been going on for the last. Well, I took in Summer of Love '67, so you realise what had been going on for the last couple of years. That you could see all the effects and everything, but you didn't quite know. You didn't quite know what was at the core of this thing.
It's very interesting. Around sort of '66. Interestingly, in the pop press, there are a lot of people saying, is British pop over? There's this kind of curious sense. And we got this interview, Dawn James interviewing Steve Marriott, I think 66, maybe early 66, for Rave. And she's saying, is British pop dead? Which I've read this a lot. And he's saying, no. And what he's aware of that people starting to make albums rather than making singles, and there is this sort of change which obviously the Revolver and Rubber Soul particularly sort of blew that door open. But Marriott's aware of it. Dawn James as a journalist isn't terribly, and so it's really interesting. It's a little glimpse there that Marriott is aware that there's this new mood kind of happening.
I want to talk about a sort of parallel kind of transition in a way. It's like the transition from R&B into soul. That word comes into the sort of lexicon, and the third of the pieces by you that we're featuring is an interview you did with Aretha Franklin in spring of 1968, and she says she never expected "I Never Loved a Man" to become a hit, but she says she knew "Respect" would be a hit. But she talks about her period on Columbia. She talks obviously about how Atlantic has changed, all of that. So you were writing quite a lot still about American music, right the way through, I guess, into the 70s, in fact. How do you remember Aretha? As a
I thought there was something mysterious about her. She chose her words carefully. And
with Ted White lurking in the background.
Well, Ted and... They seemed to get on very well.
Okay.
They seemed to get on very well. And Ted came across as a very nice guy, nice, enthusiastic guy. I don't know what happened later, but...
This was her husband and manager for any listeners who are not sure.
I think there'd been a lot of crap went on later, but then they were a couple.
Right.
They were definitely a couple. And she was... I think I asked her a couple of things and she would just smile and not answer me. But generally, she was good. I thought a couple of things that she said were really interesting, because I expected her to sort of, maybe diss the Columbia period, but she didn't at all, and neither did Ted. Apparently Columbia had given her a head when it came to whatever she wanted to record, so she was okay about that.
Yeah. The last piece is this Hendrix interview that you did, which was for Music Now magazine. So you wrote that in. You were one of the last people to interview Jimi, of course. So it's poignant to read this. He says, I think it'd be better if I'd gone to the Isle of Wight and mingled, took a sleeping bag with me and mixed with the crowd, because he's clearly quite nervous about the Isle of Wight and what he was quite daunted by this festival. And you ask him about his new recording studio, which you call Electric Ladyland at that point. Well, understandably, because that was the name of the album that had come out. But so this is September 17th.
What was the name of the studio?
It was just Electric Lady, wasn't it?
Yes.
Electric Lady.
It was just Electric Lady.
A lot of people called it Electric Ladyland.
I finally know.
Sub.
Yeah. But I mean, we've got Keith Altham's audio interview with Jimi on the site,
which he reckons is the very last interview that Jimi
may
did.
have been the very... I mean, I don't know whether Keith was sort of at the end of the queue. Obviously, Jimmy's at the Londonderry Hotel and there are a number of people interviewing him. But you knew Keith Altham at that point, I'm guessing. Yeah, of course.
He'd been doing it... Jimi had been doing it all day. But I think we were the last ones.
Okay.
Me and Rob Partridge for Record Mirror.
Right.
We kind of did a joint interview, as it were, which was nice because I like Rob, bless him.
Yeah.
Hendrix was terrific. I mean, he looked wonderful. He looked really in shape, very graceful.
Yeah. Pretty
good interview, he was talking and he wanted us to hang around afterwards. He wasn't drugging at all.
No.
And, white wine, pouring white wine, chilled white wine. And
such sad.
But I had to get back for a deadline, and so did Rob, and and then of course a week or so later, whenever it was,
that's right.
I was all fuck it. Wish I'd hang around there. It just would have been so nice.
I'm really glad that you say what everyone I know who's met him says. I mean, Keith was very fond of Jimi. I remember Nancy Lewis when she took me for tea once, and she said, "Oh, Jimi was a doll." Everyone. He apparently is just a really very nice man.
That was the impression you.
A lovely vibe. And, just gorgeous. Yeah.
And a genius.
And a genius.
Angel came down from heaven yesterday. She stayed with me just long enough to rescue me.
How do you feel? How do you look back on having kind of been there at all these pivotal moments, like the first, in your piece about the Rollin Stones, you're sort of saying, these guys are going to be big, and obviously you were spot on, and you interviewed the Beatles early on and being there with Jimi Hendrix. How do you kind of look back overall on that period?
I feel I was the sort of the Zelig of pop at that time. I'm kind of, if you had a photograph of him, my face would sort of be in a corner.
There's a great passage in your book where you sort of say you feel like a character in a play which is being acted out in the real world, that you've somehow been plucked from your dreary working class suburban origins and deposited in the middle of pop music heaven and allocated a small but groovy part writing for Record Mirror during the 60s.
Yeah, that was
music
exactly the way I felt about it.
It's just such a lovely way of thinking about it, isn't it?
But I got that feeling really at the interview. That feeling came over me at the interview for the job.
Yeah.
And I remember I was waiting, and I suddenly had this feeling, and it's one of those things that you normally only get on drugs. But it was I suddenly woke up to this thing, and then I had this feeling, and I really didn't lose that for a very long time.
Fantastic.
And I just felt I'm a character in a play, and it's like and it just seems so
That's brilliant. It's really
hard
brilliant.
hard to describe, but
I love the fact that you were kind of aware of that, because for a lot of people, really interesting stuff happens. They weren't even bloody aware of it till sort of 5 years later. I just love the sense that you sort of...
Well, it was the contrast between where I'd come from and the Record Mirror, which was kind of slightly louche, and and I'd come from nothing wrong with my home life, but it was nothing like that.
Yeah.
So I had that feeling really throughout most of that time. So I did appreciate it.
That's great. That's just super.
Yeah.
Shall we go back to the Rolling Stones and talk about, because obviously this year, one of the major losses in rock and roll was the loss of Charlie Watts, who we all adored, and without whom I'm not sure the Rolling Stones are exactly the same thing. We happened to receive a couple of tapes from one of our writers, Robin Eggar, who used to write for the Sunday Times. He said, I've got this Charlie Watts audio interview. Are you interested? So,
I suppose so.
All right, send them. So I'm going to hand over to Mark to tell us about it.
Well, this is September 97. They're about to launch on the Bridges to Babylon tour. That's basically the framework of this interview. But it's very, very wide-ranging. And I mean, he starts off by talking about getting married to Shirley, and which I really like. The very first thing he talks about is getting married to Shirley, in the light of other people that they're talking about. He talks about getting to jazz as a kid, his kind of London youth, being kept sane by Shirley. I mean, this is a very rare thing. Someone marries at that age in rock and roll and stays married to them throughout the rest of their entire life.
Isn't there a sort of funny thing, like in some article about the Stones, they've tabulated how many sexual partners each of the members had, and it kind of goes. It starts with
Bill Wyman, 5,000,
and then down to Charlie Watts. One. It was fabulous.
It's great. And he talks about keeping separation between his rock and roll life and his somewhat arty home life, which I really like. He does actually mention Bill's fondness for women in an interview, that he feels that Bill sort of feels he doesn't really want to sleep alone. So there's always got to be someone there just to help him sleep. And we can listen to the first clip. He talks about the Stones then and now, like then being back in 63.
Charlie's good tonight, isn't he?
What I do is I play in a very good band. The kind of special when they're all together. What it is, I don't know. It always has been. When we were kids, there'd be 30 bands, but for some reason, when Brian and Keith and Mick were there, it was different. I used to play in about 4 bands when I joined the Rollin Stones. Like most of us did. It was like a couple of blues bands and a couple of jazz sort of thing. So it was like another band, But they were special even in those days. By that I mean there were 10 people in the club instead of 4 to see whoever played the saxophone. Yeah. And very soon it was 20, 30s, and so people. And as the years have gone on, something does happen when we get together. It's very strange.
Chin sauce.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, Norman, he absolutely echoes what you were saying. There was something special.
Oh, yeah.
Very, very early on. And also comes obviously his fondness for the band at this point, still in 1997.
I was reminded, maybe in John Pidgeon's piece, maybe in your book, that Charlie was the drummer on the opening night of Alexis Corner's Ealing Blues Club.
Really? But with another band?
Yes.
How
Yeah,
interesting.
well, that I guess was like Blues Incorporated, as it was at that point. But Charles Watts was the drummer.
Charles Watts.
So he really was there at kind of ground zero.
Yeah.
Goes with the suits.
Yeah. and a guy working in graphic design, so he's part of that sort of central London scene of being a designer and going to the jazz clubs, playing jazz and so on and so forth. He talks about maintaining his marriage, keeping horses and his Lagonda and things like that. Talks about his love of Stravinsky, Picasso and Duke Ellington. Becoming a drummer, buying records at Dobell's. Martin, our colleague on Rock's Back Pages, his dad is Bill Collier. And he lived on Charing Cross Road, and Martin worked in the mailroom of Dobell's when I knew him at art school back down in that basement. His passion for clothes. I mean, he actually takes Robin Eggar
into his wardrobe.
Into his wardrobe.
Amazing.
It's like 500 suits and so on and so forth.
Talks about where he gets them made and who tailors them and this and that. It's quite
but
fun.
he really cares about
he really
it.
does.
You were talking about Eric Clapton being well dressed, and you liking clothes. It was quite a significant thing. You know, if you could afford it.
Oh yeah.
You could go to Carnaby Street or wherever it was, and the mod shops. Charlie Watts' case, much higher end sort of designers and so on and so forth. But it's important that. Talks about touring with the Stones, just the nature of that. Let's have another clip. It's about not being impressed by fame.
I've never really been very impressed with all this thing, you know, what people think I have become, or what over years. You know, I was always in total admiration of people like Jimmy Duker and Tubby Hayes, you know, and Ronnie Scott. And my wife was a sculptor, so we kind of came from a funny area to suddenly being flung into this pop culture thing, if you like, and it became very big in the 60s, even from the art side. You know. So I suppose we're both, my wife and I, are very cynical of a lot of things, because, you know, probably keeps you sane, doesn't it? She keeps me, has kept myself very sane, yes, very much so.
When now we're respected in society, we don't worry about the things that we used to be. We're talking heroin with the president. This is the problem solved, but it can't be.
I mean, I just love the way he talks about Shirley. I have to say, it's just a really nice quality throughout this interview. He talks about his fairly brief lost years of drink and drugs, what he talks about as midlife crisis. The last person you'd imagine getting to heroin was Charlie Watts, and the fact that he did was kind of...
I remember being so shocked when I heard that.
Yeah.
We didn't really know about it until after the fact.
Yeah.
I think
it was quite short. I think it's like 3 years or something. In
I think he says
92,
83 to 86,
whatever it
something
was.
like that.
I can't remember.
Yeah.
Long enough.
You've listened to the whole interview, haven't you?
Yeah.
And I think you said you enjoyed it.
Oh, very much.
Yeah.
Especially the stuff about clothes. I was figuring out how many suits he must have bought per year since he started earning decent money.
It's just fantastic.
3 or 4, something. It was quite a lot of suits to buy.
Yes.
I mean,
Lucky fella.
Yeah, and his whole sort of... I remember when you went to that really terrible gig in 1976 at Earl's Court, one of the less
I
good.
saw 2 of those nights.
Yeah, I remember as the stage folded closed at the end of the night, him sort of like chewing gum, putting the sticks down like a worker clocking off. It really had that vibe about it.
Yeah.
Talks about being a grandfather, drawing his hotel rooms. He talks about the books he and Shirley read, and I just have this vision of the pair of them in bed, sort of both reading books in their 50s and 60s. I loved that, actually. That was really nice. Making the new album. And he talks about his qualities as a drummer. And we'll hear a clip about the midlife crisis and the heroin stuff at the end of the podcast. But yeah, I loved listening to this. I thought it was terrific.
Yeah, I mean, when Charlie died, it really felt like, you know, the last time I felt like that was with Bowie, that I sort of lost someone. Obviously, I didn't know Charlie Watts, but it felt almost like a personal loss. And having been a Stones fan from like day one, I couldn't really. It was the sort of Charlie will always be there somehow. You know, it's like Keith will always be there. Of course, they won't always be there. But he was such. I mean, maybe just to talk a little bit about his drumming. We did talk about it a bit just after he died, but just to return to that scene, I mean, I just wanted to. There are a couple of things in the new Mojo where David Frick is talking to Mick and Keith about them, and Mick says Charlie gave a swing to the band, the swerve and subtlety, and Keith says Charlie Watts was my bed. I could lay on there, and I know that not only would I have a good sleep, I'd wake up and it would still be rocking. I was caught. He probably was falling asleep because he's But I mean, did you ever like talk to Charlie? Did you interview him, or was it mainly like Brian or Mick or Keith?
Chatted with him the first time.
Yes. Never
Never interviewed him. No. I only ever interviewed Mick and Brian, and I don't know whether I even interviewed Keith. I can't really remember now, to be honest.
And he was kind of a jazz drummer, in to all intents and purposes. And what was your view on jazz at that time? Were you listening to much jazz, or was it really more about the rhythm and blues?
Well, it was really more about the rhythm and blues. Of course, which at certain points, you know, would shade into.
Sure.
Because after a while, you get into, you know, Louis Jordan, and then that takes you. That can take you into jazz quite easily. But no, I didn't really get into jazz until probably, I suppose, when I stopped being interested in pop music, which was about the mid-'80s.
Funny that.
And then I just started to listen to a lot more jazz. I started to go back, listen to music of the 40s and the 30s. Because, you know, sort of hip-hop was taken over from...
Sure.
It's great to hear him talking about, you know, liking Duke Ellington and, as you said, Stravinsky. And it's you know, he really does care very deeply about that whole history, and that you can hear that in his playing, I think.
I mean, you know, he reminds me a bit of some of the people who taught me at art school in the 70s, these people who'd be probably around his age. And they're sort of self-taught, culturally self-taught people who often from working class backgrounds, who have maybe gone to art school, maybe not, but they had sort of sought out stuff which was exciting and different from mainstream stuff, which was like Stravinsky and or Duke Ellington, and he really reminds me of that as a person. He's culturally in that sort of slot. Yeah,
I mean, it would be interesting to think about the Stones with a very different kind of drummer, and would they have been the same group at all, really, without Charlie's style, which was always subtle, and he didn't hit the drums hard. He did swing. That jazz feel was there. I mean, if you imagine the Stones with, I don't know, like Ginger Baker or Keith Moon or John Bonham, I mean, it just it wouldn't have worked at all.
I mean, it's partly because of the nature of Keith Richards' guitar
exactly
playing.
That's where the rhythm is really generated.
Really, it comes from Keith Richards, and in a way that Keith needed someone who gave him that sort of space and swing to sort of play
I
on
think
top
that's absolutely right.
I think if you had had John Bonham, it would just like killed the rhythm guitar parts, having a massive backbeat snare.
I think that's absolutely right. But he's so lovely in this interview. It was a joy to listen to. So unpretentious and as he says, so unimpressed by all the kind of circus around, you know, particularly Mick.
So there's that famous story of him punching Mick. He said, "Where's my drummer?" And he'd got dressed. He's in bed. Mick had rung him up. So he said, "Where's my drummer?" And Charlie got up, got dressed immaculately, and went downstairs and punched him in the face.
Cold-cocked him. I mean, I wish Robin had asked him if that was a true story. I mean, it's I hope it's a true Anyway, in
addition, ask Mick.
But also I love the idea of him getting dressed immaculately to go down and do this. That's Charlie, isn't it?
Completely. So, in addition to Charlie Watts, we've obviously lost a lot of other musicians this year, and in the last, literally 24 hours, we've learned about the death of Robbie Shakespeare of Silent Robbie fame.
Robbie Shakespeare.
The great Robbie Shakespeare, the bass player in reggae's greatest rhythm section, really.
I mean, one of reggae's greatest rhythm
sections.
Because there were a few of them, you know.
Sure, absolutely.
I saw him playing behind Lee Perry. Very odd. So this is quite a few years back. Apparently they almost didn't play because they were Sly and Robbie were holding out for more money from the promoter up to the very last minute. But they were just there, being there that night. I mean, Lee Perry was a joke. He was just like shambling around the stage and kind of shouting at the microphone in a sort of very random way. The rhythm section were electrifyingly good. They're just that pulse that they produced.
Yeah. I mean, I loved Sly and Robbie from the first time I heard them playing. I don't know what it would have been, like a Gregory Isaacs record or something. I'm not sure. We're running a piece that Don Snowden wrote for the LA Times in August 1982, and there's just a couple of lovely quotes. Actually, Sly Dunbar talking about Robbie. We put our little thing into reggae. It's still the same feel, but we help move it from being the one style all the time. A lot more can be done to the music, and me and Robbie sometimes like to take a chance to make a certain sound. And he says, when we started playing, that sound just came, that certain lock-in between the bass and drums. The kind of line that Robbie plays always corresponds with the kind of drums I play. His bass sounds big and full, and all the others sound tinny and small.
That's what, 82, so that's around the time when they're doing all that glorious work with Grace Jones. And
Exactly. So it's the year after...
I mean, that was like 80, 81, 82, that sort of stuff. Private Lives being the first big hit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think, it being Grace Jones, therefore not technically a reggae artist. So it's not reggae music at all they're playing. They're playing some extraordinary Afro-Caribbean dance groove. A bit of New York and a bit of Jamaica sort of merged together. And at the time, it was a revelation. I was portrait at BBC at the time, and Private Lives would come on the radio. And there's a bit where Sly Dunbar hits the snare and a cymbal on the second beat of the bar at the end of the fill rather than the first beat, and we'd mime it sort of like
In the Air Tonight.
Yes. That's singing more.
No, that's not what I meant.
But we'd all sort of just roll around the kit and bash at the end of it.
In the Air Tonight.
It was fantastic. It was a fantastic time for singles because things like Laurie Anderson's "Oh Superman" came out around very much the same time. It was very, very good little stretch that. But yeah, slightly
such a
Robbie.
Distinctive sound they come up with, especially on the Grace Jones album. Pull Up to the Bumper, My Jamaican Guy, and the way they use kind of syndromes
in a more straight
mix.
reggae. I mean, the early Black Uhuru stuff, the first 2 or 3 Black Uhuru albums, they're absolutely fantastic on that.
Hold up to the bumper, baby, in your long black limousine. Hold up to the bumper, baby, drive it in between. Hold up.
I also just want to note the passing of a writer, not one of our writers. To our regret, we'd love to have got him on board. We did try, but the Black New York writer Greg Tate, Greg Ironman Tate, who died a couple of days ago.
Sad loss.
Yeah, I mean, a fantastic writer. We've added a piece by Michael A. Gonzalez, a homage to Greg, written in 2007.
Right,
and it's a kind of love letter to the influence that Greg had on him and so many other writers, black and white writers. And his most famous sort of book was Flyboy in the Buttermilk. But he wrote a Hendrix biography and was a great character. You know, he had this term freaky deke, D-E-K-E, which was his term. He wrote a piece for the Village Voice in the early 80s, where he kind of identified himself as a freaky deke, which was someone who wrote about rock as well as funk, R&B, hip hop, and of course he was instrumental in the formation of the Black Rock Coalition with Vernon Reid and others.
Oh right,
so he was, he was very much in that kind of, Hendrix, Sly Stone, hip hop. I'm not going to just write about
the one thing
Black American music. Fantastic.
I'm really
guy.
sad that we haven't got his stuff on the site.
Well, maybe we can try, but
absolutely.
I mean, many people have been writing tributes in the last 48 hours to Greg Tate.
65, same age as me. That's really depressing.
Yeah,
I love that piece that we're featuring by Michael Gonzalez, where he sort of says the first time that Greg Tate ever acknowledged and liked one of his articles. Greg Tate, I can't believe it. He liked my article.
Yes.
Fran stared at me as though I was nuts. Grinning like a fool, I hope that nobody saw my silly ass losing my mind. It was crazy, but for that exact moment, I felt like a true writer.
Yeah,
and that's
beautiful.
that is beautiful, and it's a very sad loss.
Yeah,
he was a wonderful writer.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, it's interesting that you Norman would have seen just in addition to the musical changes that we've talked about, the changes in writing about music, the evolution of music journalism, which continues to evolve. And I don't know whether you probably, I don't know whether you would have read Greg Tate in the Village Voice or things like that, but have you kept abreast of the way music writing has evolved?
Not particularly. The stuff that I started out with, which was, really just straight ahead pop writing, if you like, that, as you know, started to change and expand around about 66, 67, that sort of time. And I just felt that the kind of stuff I was doing was really not quite up to it, because it wasn't hip anymore. And of course, you want to be hip.
But you were a hip writer. I mean, there was a hipness to your approach to writing. I mean, you may not have been, Richard Meltzer, but there was a hipness. I mean, I think of you as the first British writer who brought a kind of just a hip edge to your appreciation of things like rhythm and blues.
Perhaps it was my age, and I was when I was doing it. There weren't, for a couple of years, there weren't any other writers of my age working on any of the papers. Yeah. So I sort of had that advantage. Sure. And you know what it's like, if you're like 17, 18, 19, you sort of know what's happening.
Yes.
Yeah. You've got that thing, you've got that antenna, and you just feel what's happening. You're in the zeitgeist.
Yeah. Also, what you were writing about a slightly niche subject, which gives you a sort of the hit thing on top of that. Because if everyone else is writing about the Springfields or whoever, and it's chart pop and so on and so forth, it's what it is. It's they're part of the promotional arm of the music business.
I did plenty of those as well.
But mainly as Wesley Lane, I think.
Well, I tried to shunt all that into Wesley's corner, but I wasn't always able to do so.
Tell us about your relationship with Wesley.
Yes. Where did you first meet Wesley? That is funny. But you mentioned in your book, there's a funny moment where you say you're getting slightly miffed that other young people were coming into the game and writing about music.
Oh, I wasn't miffed about it.
Okay.
It was just that I saw what was happening, and I thought, and of course it was nice to have those people at press receptions, because you could live off press receptions at that time. I think Richard Green did live off press receptions for quite a long time. But so it was nice to have people, of a similar age that you could talk to.
Richard must have been older than you, though, was he? Was he about the same age?
He's a bit older than me. A bit older, but he didn't act it much.
Especially when he was under the table.
He went upstairs and he was invited to interview Bob Dylan, and got so drunk that he had no memory of a single word Bob Dylan had said during the entire sort of 3 hours.
Not ideal. Yes.
Not ideal.
We've come to the point in the show where Mark's going to talk us through some of the pieces that he's added, and Jasper may also chip in. And if you hear anything that prompts you to say something about this artist or that artist, please just jump in.
Okay.
Well, from last week, Maureen Cleave we've had on board for a while, but I've only gained access to her Evening Standard stuff relatively recently, and it is astonishing. It's very sophisticated writing, going right back. This is Phil Spector, 1964. She interviews Phil Spector, and he says, "The records are built up like a Wagner opera. They start simply and they end with dynamic force, meaning and purpose." And then he also says, "I'm the least quoted man in the industry. I stick to my little bourgeois haunts and I don't bother with the masses." So it's a classic Phil Spector.
I mean, you met Spector, didn't you? And wrote Spector, about him, and that would kind of, you talk about his paranoia, and I think you hint at his grandiosity.
When did you meet
him? He was brought to the Record Mirror office, like Eric Clapton.
Well, I met him round at Deham's, and it was one Saturday, and Phil didn't like everybody looking at him. So we went up to Record Mirror. There was nobody there, but like chatting to him was like chatting to you guys. It's like he was really into the music,
right?
And that was that. And of course, Andrew was getting very close to Phil. In fact, Andrew was kind of hero worshipped Phil, which was strange with Andrew because he wasn't the hero worshipping type. No. And then I bumped into Phil again. Well, I didn't bump into him. I was at a press reception for Benny King about a week or so later, and Andrew was there, and I'm interviewing Ben. Nobody else wanted to interview him, And I'm interviewing Ben, talking to him about Rudy Lewis, actually. And Andrew came rushing out of this room, at Decca, dragged me in, and Phil's there, face like thunder. He's well miffed because Edward Lewis, in New York, has taken a tape of the latest Crystals single, which was Little Boy, which was a pretty terrible record for the Crystals. And Phil was saying, what am I going to do? Why is he doing this? The record's going to be a flop. It will be the end of the Crystals. So Andrew and I, and we said, well, why don't you put out Uptown, which has never been out as a single? Nice record.
Oh my God.
Bit more Lieber Stoller
Yeah.
than Phil. So we said, well, why not put out, Uptown and Shove Little Boy on the outside? And Phil said, yeah, great. So they did that, and they pressed some, and they sent them out. But Phil, meanwhile, had gone back to New York, and on the same plane as the Beatles, I think, when they actually went over on that first promotional visit. And there was a song there that I believe Greenwich and Barry had written called I Wonder, and Phil thought that was good, recorded that, withdrew the Uptown thing, and
Uptown was
that
great.
was that.
Uptown was fabulous.
Yeah,
That's the flight.
better than I Wonder.
That's the flight back to New York. There, he claims that he produced all the Beatles stuff in that Roy Carr interview we ran back. It's fantastic. This is Phil all over it.
Yeah.
He says, "Well, I produced all the Beatles' early hits. George Martin,
Elvis,
Yes. George Martin was just the arranger. I mean, you saw me get off that plane in New York with the Beatles. Well, I've been there producing all their singles. I mean, it's marvelous stuff,
But then he comes uptown each evening to my tenement. Uptown where folks don't have to pay much rent. And when he's there with me, he can see that he's everything.
1968 NME, June Harris interviews Gary Puckett of the Union Gap. I'm always quite intrigued by this sort of the time when rock is becoming rock, capital R. There's still these kind of really big pop bands like Gary Puckett and Union Gap. I just read that slightly tedious autobiography by Tommy James of Shondells fame. And he's they're another one, like Gary Puckett, Tommy James. These, he says, we're not interested into any of that psychedelic stuff. We're not interested in it. It's not for us anyway. I know it's fashionable right now to wear flared military jackets. We do it to be authentic more than fashionable. He says, not every group out of California has to look like the Grateful Dead or sound like the Jefferson Airplane. Well, that's all fair enough.
Fair point.
And then he recalls Crimson and Clover,
which is a great pop record.
Yeah,
Fabulous pop record.
and Crystal Blue Persuasion.
Yeah, because they're not jogging
Nothing
records
to
at all.
No. Whatever made you think that? Very nice to have a brief interview with Carol Grimes on the site, because we don't have enough on her, partly because she wasn't interviewed a great deal. This is when she was with Delivery. Peter Jones interviewing her for Record Mirror 1970, and she says, now it's okay for girls to stomp around without being regarded as raging lesbians. The important thing is not to go too far.
Because then you'll be mistaken for a raging
lesbian. Lorraine Altman for Rolling Stone 1974 interviews Clive Davis. He's just in the process of being resurrected. He had been fired by CBS for that corruption, but it's like payola thing. Why was Clive Davis
I can't actually remember, to be honest with you.
I was actually working in the press office at CBS at that time.
Were you?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, you
And the meetings they had about Clive, because he was the big cheese.
That's right.
Yes.
I know one of the things was he'd put his son's bar mitzvah on expenses.
Didn't everyone do that? Sure, Morris Levy.
Yeah, but there's expensive. There's only like 100,000 for the bar mitzvah, maybe.
I think mainly it was giving artists lots and lots of money to buy drugs.
Right, yes.
Well, given that he was working closely with the likes of Sly Stone, I don't think he had much choice.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, this is interesting because he's just joined, who was it he joined? A company who owned Buddha, I think it was, who he turned into Arista.
Right.
So it's before Arista, but he's just taking the reins of what will become Arista.
Yes.
And he's very full of himself. I'm back, you know.
Back,
he's-
baby. Yeah, because Arista, did it launch in 75? Because, I mean, Horses, of course, was
yes.
improbably on
that is
Arista,
curious,
but that was
isn't it?
75, yeah.
He says to Lorraine, he says, I'm into talent wherever the talent is. I must be surrounded by people who live, eat and breathe the record business. You know, I just hear hilarious stories. I mean, we got a story on the site somewhere about him playing the new Prince album to journalists, and he's dancing.
I was there.
You were there, and he was
excruciating.
dancing on the stage to it.
Yeah, it was at the Mermaid Theatre. And basically, Clive introduced it. There was a little kind of podium. Clive introduced it and then says, right, so we're going to hear the album. And you sort of assume he's going to go and, like, sit down in the front row or whatever. But he doesn't. He stays there, and throughout the playback, he's kind of sort of doing this at the podium, and everyone's like, oh, fuck off. Yeah.
Moving swiftly on, Gary Newman album reviewed by Paul Morley in 1981 for The NME, and he said, he was never, though, as he'd like to think, a leader, capital A, capital L. No one of any worth will be influenced by Gary Newman, despite his best wishes. Newman can filter and exploit past noises as sensibly, even as surprisingly as anyone, but he'll never be an original. Which is brutal, but sort of broadly true.
Yeah, he wasn't an original. I mean, he nicked so much from
and
Bowie.
of that
Ridiculous.
electro generation, he was the least original of that generation of electro artists.
Yeah.
I mean, Human League and so on and so forth.
Well, some of those records now do have a certain kind of cult status, don't they? I mean, 9 Inch
Did you
Nails
see that
and so
documentary on him? He actually
No.
came over rather sweet. He's
Yeah.
very autistic. He's
Yeah,
he married his fan club president, and they've seemed like a rather nice sort of situation with nice kids and all that.
Yeah.
And he's quite sweet, but
Yeah.
can't say I've listened. Right, let's move swiftly on to this week. Again, Maureen Cleave interviewing Burt Bacharach for the Stand in '64. He said, "I prefer to write for the coloured voice. There's more tension in it." With tension. He says, I'm a very dramatic person as far as music goes. I don't like things that are flat or dull, either in music or right down the line.
You mentioned Bert in your book, and if my memory is correct, you go to his hotel suite. You hadn't had time to kind of change into a suit. You were in your own was looking quite scruffy. And Bert, you come into Bert's hotel room, and he's looking immaculate, of course, and he sort of looks rather disdainful.
He was a little bit sniffy about it. It was actually at the music publisher's office. So,
okay.
I went with Barry May, who was he was working at Record Mirror at that time, and we did a joint interview with Bert, who actually was fine after a while.
Once he got over your clothing.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't
apologised profusely.
I would normally wear suits for work, but for that day, for some reason, I was in jeans and a leather jacket or whatever.
Shame on you. Yeah.
Shame on me. But anyway.
I'm noticing you're not wearing a Savile Row suit today.
No.
We are disappointed.
Charlie would have.
I should
wanted-
really go and. His suits wouldn't fit me, unfortunately. I'd sort of be around there, Got any spare suits there?
Keith Richards, interviewed by Victor Bocris for High Times in 1978.
Perfect for this episode.
This is, I never turned blue in somebody else's bathroom. I consider that the height of bad manners. Up until the middle 60s, the most obvious method of rock and roll death was chartered planes.
I love that. I kind of the etiquette of heroin.
I know. Even being busted, it certainly isn't boring. I think boring is the worst thing of all, anything but boring. So better to be busted than be bored. Moving on to 84, Johnny Marr, interviewed by Hugh Fielder for Sound. He says, I don't like video games, but if it was a choice between that and a new Visage album, I'd get the video game. That's my lot. Jasper, Barney, what have you guys got?
I've got a couple of things to mention, as always. First of which is a nice light-hearted interview by Precious Williams in the Evening Standard on the 1st of June 2001 with one 15-year-old Lisa Roxanne, who was at that point kind of being touted as, like, South London's answer to Beyoncé, and I think made one single and never anything else. But it's rather sweet, this interview. List 3 things you'd abolish from London life. Answer: rain, racism and boring people. And 3 things you would make compulsory for Londoners: to say hello to each other in the street, to dress funky, and to give money to the homeless. Just thought it was nice. Funny little snapshot of My London by Lisa Roxanne.
Yeah.
Next up, the new mellow Snoop Dogg Still Has Bite by Sophie Hayward in the Times on the 4th of December 2009. And this is kind of an interesting point for Snoop Dogg. It's kind of his image is starting to shift from, you know, gangster to what he is now, which is almost like national treasure on TV with Martha Stewart kind of vibe. He tells me about his plans to open a chain of snooper markets, which will presumably offer money off Snoop-ons on his own range of cuppa snoops. I'm fairly sure you could challenge this man to a bout of apple bobbing and he'd come out looking more fabulous than the Fonz. But he also says, now that I'm more concerned and caring and a father and a husband, it just seems like the nicer I get, the less respect I get. Which is interesting to hear him say, because he actually has successfully become someone who, you know, seems actually like a really decent guy, even though there are some pretty nasty rumours about what he did to various people that crossed him early on. So it's always interesting. I love his voice.
Yeah.
The sound of him rapping, even though sometimes what he raps is a bit questionable in terms of misogyny, but you know, just the sound of his voice. Sophie Hayward points out in this article as well, he just has a voice like nobody else.
Yeah.
It's mellifluous and gritty and wonderful. I love Snoop.
Yeah.
I'm putting out the blunt cause I say that I need you more in my life than I need a bag of weed. Now I compare you to a bird when she fly by. I wanna rock you back to sleep like Betty Bye-Bye. Bouncing the lack with your hand on my lap. Throw your bags in the back, I'ma show you where it's at. Ain't no telling if we...
Lastly, Centre of Chaos, Commons Electric Circus, Michael A. Gonzalez in the Red Bull Academy magazine in March 2015. And this is, he's looking back on the rapper Common's album Electric Circus, which is, again, a really interesting album because it's at a point when the Soulquarians, like, you know, Questlove's kind of circle of musicians, D'Angelo, Jay Dilla, Roy Hargrove, Talib Kweli, Bilal, Q-Tip, you know, all these people are coming together to do stuff that goes beyond hip-hop and through jazz and kind of just doing all these interesting things. And actually Greg Tate is quoted in it. The impact of the Soulquarians was about who they brought on. I liked him as a rapper, but Common wasn't exactly pushing any envelopes before Quest brought him into the Soulquarian circle of progressive music. So it's worth a read just for an insight into that scene and into Common, who I think is actually a really interesting and underrated rapper still.
Yeah. Did he put out an album called Like Water for Chocolate? Was
He
that
did,
a movie?
yes.
Yeah, I do remember liking that very much.
What have you got?
I've got It's Time for the End of the Podcast. Which is a fantastic article. Actually, do you know, I thought what I've just have left very last is, we didn't mention this when we were talking about Robbie Shakespeare and Greg Tate, but we have also lost John Miles of music fame, and I thought we should probably note this. So we've made freely available a Harry Doherty piece from 1976 in Melody Maker. Do you remember that record?
Yes,
music
I do.
Was my first love, my mistress, my...
I hated it then when he played it in the office. And I hated it all over again.
It was possible.
He was also heavily involved in the Alan Parsons project, wasn't he?
That's right.
John Miles.
Exactly.
I thought he was an utter mediocrity from the get-go.
So this is our paying tribute to John Miles. No, I mean it's one of those kind of
R.I.P.
Yeah, I know. Yes, or not. I mean, sorry, John, but it is one of those records from the 70s that it does just make you cringe horribly. There's lots of kitschy records from the 70s that I kind of love, like All By Myself by Eric Carmen, but music by John Miles
partly because it's about music.
Yes.
And it's awful music about music.
Yes, music about music. Yeah.
It was my first love, but not anymore after listening to this record.
Yeah, I know, exactly. You might have missed, you would have been in New York at that time, or maybe you just missed music by Norman.
I remember that record, yeah. But wasn't the one before a bit better, the hit that he had? It was a disco-y thing.
I can't
remember.
It was a hit.
It's time for us to rediscover John Miles.
I bet my DJ friends have dug it out. Dug it out.
It's probably a Balearic favourite.
It's become a massive Balearic favourite. Yes.
Anyway, it is time to wrap up, and to thank you so much for coming all the way from Muswell Hill to be with us today.
Well,
Norman.
thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you. It's been
really great.
huge fun.
And just can I recommend to anyone listening Norman's great book, Shake It Up, Baby! ! Which I think, correct me if I'm wrong, the subtitle is Notes from a Pop Music Reporter, 1961 to 1972.
It's sort of the print version is no longer available, but I'm talking with an American publisher at the moment who may be putting it out again, quite likely.
Hope so.
Unfortunately, Amazon have still got the Kindle version, which they really shouldn't have up there. I mean, I shouldn't really go into this, but dealing with Amazon is a complete nightmare if you want to get something taken down.
What's a shocking thing to hear?
Yeah, I've actually got my union, the Society of Authors, they're onto it now. So
good.
Because I just go around in circles with
for everything they've got.
Yes.
I also like the fact
That might be quite
you
wrong.
describe yourself as a reporter, because Mike John, who's New York, used to write for the New York Times in the sort of late 60s. He says, I wasn't a critic, I was a reporter.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
You know. And he ended up, he had a massive row with Kreisgau. And it was that was part of the thing. But anyway, Mike John saying, I wasn't a critic, I was a reporter.
Well,
that's the way I feel about
it's a great
it.
word. Isn't
Thank
it?
you.
Reporter, so,
And it's a great
we're
book.
honoured to have.
So when it's republished, go out and buy it because it's really lovely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I have my copy in the office here, so if anyone wants to, make me like a very generous offer for it, I can get it. A signed copy I can probably provide. I would like you to sign it, actually, Norman. Anyway.
Split it 50-50.
Brilliant, fantastic. So we will be back for the next episode with the American writer Holly George Warren, and until then, we would like to say goodbye. And Mark, you're going to talk us out with.
Well, it's Charlie Watts' Drug and Drink Hell.
Happy notes as always.
On a happy note. Yeah.
Brilliant, thanks. Well,
Bye.
Bye.
I remember I tried these things I'd never done before, ever. Like what? Heroin.
Oh, yes. Okay, I understand, yes. Yes, I tried it a couple of times. I didn't like it.
You can take heroin and nothing happens, and then all of a sudden you are hooked on it, And I was a real minor little thing, I really stopped like that, I stopped it all myself, but I could see that I used to look like Dracula, and I used to take speed all the time, so I'd live 3 days and sleep 2, live 3, and you don't look too good at the end of that.
That was Charlie Watts in conversation with Robin Eggar in 1997, concluding this week's Rock's Back Pages podcast. Many thanks to special guest Norman Jopling. Keep an eye out for his book, Shake It Up, Baby! Please note that this episode was recorded before the death of Mike Nesmith, so we'll be paying tribute to him in the next episode. The hosts are Barney Hoskins and Mark Pringle, and it was co-hosted and produced by Jasper Murison Bowie. The Rock's Back Pages podcast is part of the Pantheon Podcast Network. You can find thousands of articles, as well as hundreds of full-length audio interviews, at rocksbackpages.com.
Music was my first love, and it will be my last. Music of the future,